Welcome back. In this clip, we'll talk about the shading and rendering of our scene. So before we start applying shaders and get into the process of doing the rendering, let me go through with the final settings of these droplet particles. So I've decided to go with the lifespan with the smaller value of lifespan to 1.5 and a lifespan random with a value of 0.5. So with this, the droplet particles will appear and they'll die within a span of maybe 1 or 2 seconds. All right, and this will not going to create a cluster of particles. So I just want the droplets to be fairly less in the quantity, and I would like to give focus to these the dripping particles. All right, and it's just my own aesthetic decision. And if in case you wanted to take the reference, then in that case also most of the time our eyes focuses on the dripping particle rather than these droplets. And one more thing to be discussed is the output mesh. So the blobby radius scale has been reduced to 0.115 with a dip in the value of mesh triangle size. Earlier these values were 0.1 and these values were 0.125. So the reason why I just wanted to give the mesh triangle size with a lower value, because I can capture some more details, because I have simply reduced the blobby radius scale. Rest everything is same. Alright, now let's talk about the shading and the shaders for our final effect. So we'll use primarily two important shaders. That would be the mental ray MIA material X for the glass of the window and for these droplets. The most important thing is the IOR, that is the index of refraction. So let's first talk about the shaders of these droplets and the dripping particles. So we can go inside the hyper shade over here, and let me just clear the graph. Now inside this section, Mendel ray over here, we can click to the materials and can get the MIA material X. Alright, now you can simply name this as a, let's say, droplet underscore shader. Alright, now the most important thing is the properties of the refractions. So in this case I'm giving the diffuse to a value of almost 0. I just want to maintain a dark color, and the reflectivity, we can vary this, we can experiment this. So I guess the reflectivity should be given with little less value, maybe 0.75, maybe 0.8. Alright, now the most important thing is the index of refraction, that allows how much the light will bend once it passed through the droplets. Well, the IR for the water is 1.33, so I would like to go with the value of 1.33. Alright, and yes, of course I want to maintain the full transparency, so let's just increase this value, and with that we have a much better shading system that can support the shading for the droplets as well as for the dripping particles. Alright, and I've also previously created this, so let me just also go through with the settings. So this is the previously done shading system, and I think so everything is more or less the same. We don't have any changes over here. We are still maintaining the reflectivity 1. So let's do one thing, let's also increase the reflectivity to maybe around 1. Alright, not a problem. And let me just reposition this. Alright, now we need to select the particles, that is the polysurface 2 and the polysurface 1. With both of these particles selected, we can simply right click and assign material to the viewport selection. So with this, now our particles are having the shaders. Alright, now you must be thinking about that, everything seems to be so black. Yes, definitely, because we don't have any background image. So if I press the 6th shortcut, that is for the texture, well, what I have done, I have simply placed a plane, and let me just take you over there, and there is a background plane that I have assigned, so that once we start doing the rendering, we should have something in the background. And this background has been given with some image, and I have simply blurred out that image because I just want to give my focus on these drops and these droplets as well as the dripping particles. Alright, now the most important thing is everything seems to be quite good, but there's one problem. As you can see, there is no glass appearing in front of these droplets and the dripping particles. So for that, if you remember, we already have a window, the window which is basically the emitter for the droplets as well as for the dripping particles. So what I have done, I have simply selected this window, just duplicate this and extrude this. So if I just hide this and bring out the extruded version of this window, here it is, the extruded version. All right, now simply we need to assign a shader to the window as well, so we can go inside the hyper shade. All right, and let me just gonna bring out another shader, that is the similar one which we have already created for the droplets and the dripping particle, that is the nParticle's. And this time I would like to change again the diffuse set to the black, with the reflectivity to a very small value, maybe 0.35, because I just don't want the background to appear in front of that glass, because the whole concentration is on the dripping as well as on the droplets. And technically also the reflectivity in the glass is way too much less. Yes, obviously we like to focus on the index of refraction. So for the thick glass, I like to go with 1.6 or maybe 1.55 values. All right. And with the transparency, yes, I like to increase the transparency. Maybe I can just dip it down a little bit. And if you just wanted to give some interesting colors to the window, let's say we can have some bluish kind of a tint inside this, and obviously the variations will definitely be there, and I just want to leave it up to your artistic decisions, whichever way you want to give. So now select that window and right click, assign material to the selections. Alright, so with this we are good to go. Now I've just simply created a light, that is the point omni light. You can go over here inside the create and can get that light. So one thing which is very required to enable the radius shadows. Alright, now let's go inside the render settings. So for this particular module only, I am relying upon the mental ray. Alright, so now inside the quality, we are using the legacy sample mode, which is set to the adaptive sampling. And I don't think so you get that option so easily, because for that you need to go down and you need to enable the advanced options. So everything is hidden inside this, the legacy option. So you need to go over here and you have to change the default one, which is the unified sampling. Once you open and install your Mentorlay, you'll have the unified sampling. But for this thing I would like to go with the legacy settings. So that is the you can go inside the legacy options and bring the legacy sampling mode. Alright, now with this we have just tweaked the value of max sample, which was default set to the 0. I just increased to a value of 1 so that we can have some better anti-aliasing effects. And the anti-aliasing contrast was 0.1, so I've just dipped it down to the lowest value, that is 0.010. And this will also going to improve the jitters inside the scene, and this will really helps us in achieving a smooth quality result. And finally I have changed the filter type from the gauze to the Michelle with the value filter size 4:4. Alright, not a problem. And yes, I've also switched on the option jitter. That will also going to preserve the values of my anti-aliasing and helps in reducing the fickle as well as the jittering of the scene. Now for the sequence of render, I am using these sequences of approximately 150 frames. So I can go over here in the common tab and I can simply get the values of start frame and end frame, and I'm using the camera that is a perspective. You may change it according to your own needs and requirements. This time the default camera is a perspective. And yes, I'm using the apply output transform to the render so that I can have the final images which are sRGB having the gamma inside this. You can simply give the name. In this case, just for a raw render, I'm going with the Maya IFF. You can simply go with the TIFF or maybe with the Targa, whichever you want, or you may also can go with the EXR images, Open EXR. But this is just for demo or just for a very raw render, so I like to go with the Maya IFF. Alright, now with all these settings done, once your scene is ready, you can simply set the camera angle and can go inside the render and can utilize the render sequence. Alright, so I'll do one thing before we start creating a render sequence. Let me show you a still render of our scene. Alright, so I'm taking pause over here and I'll show you the final render image. Welcome back, and here we are. So this is the final image that we have got. If you just disable the color correction, you can see there the final result is way too much dark. So I'm utilizing the view transform settings, the linear sRGB settings, and this is the the droplet we have nParticle's, which is already converted to the polygons, and these are the small droplets. So the dripping particles are also, coming really very nice. We can have some more better realism inside this. The dripping particles are also offsetting and displacing the droplets, and that's the reason, because we don't have the provision to blend the particles with the dripping particles. So that's why I just want to maintain a very small lifespan of this droplet, so that it doesn't look like that, this particular dripping particle is consistently dragging the droplets. The moment it clicks the droplet particles, within a span of some milliseconds or some few seconds, the droplet should die. All right, now that's the reason I was considering the lower amount of the lifespan for the particular droplet particles. All right, now once we are done with the still image, the everything is rendering settings are almost good to go. Now we can go for the render and can click the render sequence, and I've already got the color corrected settings for you, and here we go. Now if I play the timeline, you can see how nicely and how realistically these particles are behaving. The droplets are also, appearing, and they are dying because of the lower amount of the lifespan that I've provided. And the dripping particles are absolutely great. I really like the overall motion of the particles. We can experience the fickle, the vertical fickle, as well as the horizontal fickle. And as I've already told you, that you can, yes, alter, you can change, you can increase the values of the amplitude as well as the frequency multiplier based upon your own artistic decisions. But till now these settings are also good to go, and I must say that this is not something the end of our product or end of the result. I think so we still have more room to improvise the quality of this dripping effect. All right, because there's always a scope to achieve something more and better. So with that, we are done. We are finished with the module. Now it's time to take a quick look inside the summary of our module. Alright, so let's take a quick look inside the summary of our module. So we covered the goal first of all, and then followed by the parent U and parent V attributes of the particle emitter, and then we talk about the per particle attributes like the goal U and goal V. We talk about the functions like the noise, absolute, and sphere rand, and then we discuss the workflow of converting the nParticle into the polygons. And finally, we have mental ray shaders as well as the mental ray rendering. So with this, our module is now finished. Now let's move to the next module where we talk about the fundamentals of the sprite particles. Alright, so let's get started.